As a dungeon master, you have a lot to remember. So much, in fact, that it's kind of amazing you can even remember your own name. You have to remember every piece of the story that you yourself wrote and made up. You have to remember all the NPCs that you make up. You have to remember all the rules. And frankly, sometimes it's just a struggle to remember even when you're having your next session. All this stuff going on in your head, how do you keep it all straight? Well, I don't really have the answer to that. Instead, I have more to pile on. I have 11 more things to remember as a dungeon master. You do a lot, I know, because I do the same thing. And it's often a very thankless job. But you don't do this to be thanked. You do it because it's fun, and you do it because you want to become the best dungeon master you can be. And so to that end, here are 11 more things to remember to be an even better dungeon master. Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM. This is the show for dungeon masters who just want to have better games without spending the extra time, extra money, or extra hassle to get those better games. I'm here to help you have a more fun time without making yourself go crazy in the process. I'm your host, Justin Lewis. I've been dungeon mastering for over 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, something like that. And I've also had the opportunity to sit down with really smart individuals over these last 150 podcast episodes or so and learn how to be a better DM. We're in the quest to find everything you need to really make that happen. Today, we're bringing you another personally crafted episode just for you and your observing or listening or viewing pleasure, so that way you can be a better dungeon master. Now, first of all, I do want to say thank you so much to all of you out there who are just supporting us. Over this last little bit, I've been putting in a lot of work on our Instagram, and a lot of you who are listening are probably some of those people who started following us. So I just really got to say thank you for giving us that support and, making us feel all worthwhile. I say thank you a lot, so hopefully that doesn't get you annoyed. But today is a continuation of an episode. That's right. Back on episode 2, I did 5 things every dungeon master should remember. And you should go listen to that episode because you should still remember those things, even though that episode was probably a lot worse than this episode, perhaps, unless this episode is worse than that one, in which case I feel really bad for myself. Regardless, I've done this before, and I wanted to come back to this topic because remembering is one of the most important things we can do in life, really. When you are on the path to greatness, if you can remember wins you've had, people along the way that you've met, it becomes easier to do that. If you can remember the reason why you set out to do something, doing that thing becomes all the more achievable. So remembering is crucial. If you set out to learn something and you don't remember any of the skills you've developed, you haven't learned it. But if you do remember, well then, hey, you've done it. So I do want to talk about these things that you need to remember as a dungeon master, but I also want to talk about these things because I talk to a lot of dungeon masters, and often kind of the first thing they tell me is that they have struggles with confidence or trusting themselves, and that kind of breaks my heart a little bit because as someone who has a podcast on Dungeons and Dragons, I am painfully aware that there are many listeners out there, probably you, who have more experience, more knowledge, more intuition about D&D than I do. And yet you don't have as much confidence as you should. And that breaks my heart because you're awesome, right? The people I've talked to, every single one of them has had a lot more experience DMing than me, frankly. And I'm just impressed that they don't necessarily give themselves the credit they deserve. So hopefully some of these remembrances, some of these tips can help you gather that confidence that you so richly deserve and remember it, okay, deep inside, and maintain that Carry it with you like a treasure. Because honestly, your ability as a dungeon master is a treasure. Anyways, so enough sappiness. Let's get to today's show. Also, today I'm doing a little bit more loose than I normally do. I want to infuse more personality because sometimes I have been accused of being somewhat of a robot. And it's funny that I said that way because I feel like the way I said that was very robotic. Meet more, I am a robot. But today I'm going to be a little bit more off the cuff, a little bit more loose. And everything I'm saying isn't as scripted. So wish me luck. The first thing that I want you to remember as a dungeon master, and honestly this applies more to new dungeon masters, but it definitely applies to old dungeon masters. And actually, if I could go back in time to when I first started being a dungeon master, this is the first tip that I would give myself going back in time. All right. And to illustrate this tip, I'm going to tell you or recount sort of the first 3 to 4 sessions that I ever dungeon mastered. So session 1, I did pretty well, or at least I thought I did. I felt good about that session. It went off without a hitch. I had a clear plan. Session 2 was a little bit like that, but maybe a little bit less. And then session 3 came around. And I think it was because we got to a point in the story where my party was able to make more open-ended choices. So I was more put on the spot in that session. And session 4 was fairly similar. Between those 2 sessions, and I think session 5, we were playing the Princes of the Apocalypse campaign from Wizards of the Coast. Between sessions 3, 4, and 5, I really questioned whether or not I wanted to continue being a dungeon master and whether I could do it. I struggled. And I felt inadequate. I felt like those sessions I did really bad. I felt like I sucked, to be honest. And if I could go back in time, I wish I could tell myself in that moment this first tip that every dungeon master should remember, and it's this. It's not your sole responsibility to make the game amazing. Let me repeat that. It's not your sole responsibility to make the game amazing. Now, I learned this a couple weeks ago when I was interviewing TJ Salmon from Comedy Sports here in Provo, Utah. Comedy Sports is a comedy club, you could say. It's a really fun place. I'm hoping to do more collaborations with them, specifically on our actual play side of the network. But TJ basically said, what you're doing as a dungeon master is for your players, right? But the way he said it, he was talking about improv. When you're on an improv team or doing an improv sketch with a group of people, it's not about what each individual person puts into it, but it's about what's going on stage, what everyone is doing together. And oftentimes that gets derailed when one person sort of takes control of the situation and kind of makes it their own. Instead, every person needs to be willing to sacrifice their own ideas to build on what's going on in the scene. And this showed me something very important as a dungeon master. You are the curator of the story. You're the arbitrator of the rules. You are the conductor of the grand orchestra that is the D&D game. Yet, you're not the only component. You might be the engine of a car, but you are not the brakes, the exhaust, the doors. I don't really know about cars, so I'm kind of running out of pieces, but you get the idea. You're not every single aspect of the game. And that's important because your players make up a very important part and a very large part of the game. And frankly, if you don't know this, and if you haven't told your players this is something you need to tell them ASAP. Hey guys, it's everyone's responsibility to make our game great, not just mine. So that's the first thing that I wish I would tell myself back in time. If I could go back in time, I'd tell myself. That didn't sound right at all. Let me try that again. If I could go back in time, this is what I would tell myself. It's not your sole responsibility to make the game amazing, though you do have a responsibility to do so. Next thing that every dungeon master should remember, and actually this tip will change every aspect of your life if you truly incorporate it, not just D&D. And I'm gonna tell you this tip with a story. When I 5 years ago, I had recently graduated from college for some reason. I still don't know why I did that. And if you love college and if you love higher education, definitely great for you. I got a general studies degree. I went into digital marketing. I still don't see the need for me ever having a degree, but whatever. And I was looking for a job, and I've been trying to get into the digital marketing arena, the industry, for some time, but they all needed you to have experience. So I finally found a job opening at this company that was really promising. It was a company that was kind of founded by a influencer in the digital marketing space, in the SEO space. Neil Patel, that was his name, and that's still his name. But the job was actually a sales job, and it was a very low-paying sales job. And I thought, you know what, I'll take the job, and I will work my way into a marketing position. So I took the job, very bad at sales, still to this day, and I decided if I was not the best salesperson, because I knew in order to get to move into a marketing position, I would have to be a great salesperson or do well in the job. If I was not a great salesperson, I would be the best one at just doing the work, just calling, right? I would put in as much as I could. I would give it everything I could, so that way they couldn't look at me and say, well, this reason he can't do this, or this reason we shouldn't move him over. I was not going to give them any reason. And you know what I learned? After about 3 or 4 months, I started actually getting pretty good at my job. I was doing the things they wanted me to do, not just calling, but also making appointments, okay? And this is the lesson that I learned, that you get what you give. Because I've had separate sales experiences in my life in which I did not put in as much as I could. I did not put in 100%, and I did not get 100% out of those jobs. So with dungeon mastering, everything you put in is equal to what you'll get out. Actually, let me reverse that. What you get out is going to come from what you put in. If you only put in a little bit of effort, then your games will likely be somewhat lackluster. And if you put in a little bit more effort, your games will probably be a little bit better. And if you put in a lot more effort, so on and so forth, you get the idea. So I say this hopefully not adding to the massive plate of responsibilities that you have for your daily life. We all know that you have a job, you have family, you have social responsibilities. Plus, you want to try and play D&D every once in a while, right? I know, I totally get that. But if you can give even just like 1% more, you'll be surprised at how much better your games are in return. It's this very reciprocal, generous trade. It's weird, right? You put in a little bit extra effort, and the game's just way more fun for no reason. Well, not for no reason, but it's not exactly equal, at least in my opinion. So number 2 is you get what you give. So use that to your advantage. Number 3, and this is actually the secret to improving every aspect of your game and honestly every part of your life. And honestly, I learned this when I look back at when I first started doing D&D. Again, my first 5 sessions were not great, to be honest. Even as a player, not great. I still think I sort of struggle a little bit, kind of opening myself up to the full role play, right? And just giving in, if you know what that means. But looking now, compared to back then, there are worlds of a difference. I have grown so much. I have learned so much. And this reveals the third thing that every dungeon master should remember, and that it's a skill. All right? It's a skill. Growing up, I got into percussion in elementary school. okay? I did this because my mom wanted me to have some extracurricular activities. I was already playing the piano, and I kind of wanted to be a little bit rambunctious and do something fun. I love percussion, still to this day. Don't play it, but I love it. And in junior high, my parents got me a drum kit, which was super awesome. I was not as grateful as I should have been, just like most kids. You're kids, so you're kind of a jerk. Anyways, and during junior high, I was also sent to like a day percussion drum kit camp during the summer, right? This one time. The camp was pretty fun. I learned a lot, super nervous because I was a very shy kid, still somewhat shy. And the last day, we had an opportunity to sort of record in this recording studio, super nice, super cool, with this person who was like playing the guitar really cool, just doing some interesting riffs. And each of us had the opportunity to play on the drum set and kind of just get that recorded. They'd burn us a CD, and it was great, right? We were like a rock star. When it came to be my turn, I did not do the recording. Despite everyone's encouragement, I did not do the recording. Wouldn't it be nice to have someone in your corner as a dungeon master? Maybe having someone who can help you find solutions to your DMing problems and help you improve every aspect of your game. Maybe someone who has a pretty good Al Pacino impersonation from his part in Any Given Sunday. Well, here at How to Be a Better DM, we are doing an experiment. We are offering 5 free coaching sessions to separate listeners of the show. During these coaching sessions, we'll work with you through your strengths and weaknesses as a DM to help you generate a game plan to make both better. You can either send in a recording of one of your games, or we'll attend it live if able. If all else fails, we can still chat about what you struggle with and talk with you through any prep you've done for your upcoming games to help you be better. If you're interested for one of these 5 free coaching sessions, go to sessionzerostudios.com/coaching and sign up. Spoiler alert, we are building an army. That's right. We're building an army of amazing dungeon masters who want to make the world of D&D a better place. If you want to join our army and fight by our side against the evil forces of boredom and bad DMing, join our Discord and lend your voice to the cause. Go to sessionzerostudios.com/Discord and join for free today. That's sessionzerostudios.com/Discord and enlist in the fight against boredom. Now, this likely reflects some internal growth that I still need to do. However, I didn't realize at the time that even though I didn't have a lot of skill on the drum set, I still had some. I still could play a simple rudimentary beat. And playing that with someone who plays the guitar professionally and getting that recorded and having that like forever, that would have been really cool. And I would have been proud of that. But I didn't realize at the time that it's a skill. And you need to grow in the skill. You need to be grateful for the points of skill you have, but you also need to work on developing it. As a dungeon master, you aren't where you want to be. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. But you are farther along than where you were. And I can guarantee you that with 100% certainty because we're always growing, all of us. So with your dungeon mastering skills, realize that it is a skill. Give yourself a break and also write down the skills that you need to improve on. For example, myself, I know for a fact I need to improve on balancing combat encounters and understanding mechanics well enough that I can kind of move into the actual game designing part of being a dungeon master, right? Creating interesting encounters that aren't just going to kill all my players, but they're still going to be challenging. Naturally, that is a skill I need to work on. And also, I need to be able to sort of min-max the creatures that I put in those encounters. Now, you might have different skills you need to work on. Only you can know what skills you need to work on, but you do need to realize that they are skills and that once you identify them, you can cut them down and break them down into steps, and then you can take those steps. That's number 3. It's all a skill. Now, For number 4, let me tell you something that you've been needing to hear for a very, 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 very long time. You need to hear this. But before I tell you that, I'm going to tell you a story. When I was young, I lived just down the road from my best friend, and we'd hang out a lot. His backyard was a lot bigger than mine. They had this massive kind of dirt area, and one day we did this very fun thing. There was a bunch of plywood in the backyard and kind of boards and stuff because we were always, trying to do something. We built a fort back there, all sorts of stuff. I came over, and my friend had sort of built like an obstacle course, kind of. And I don't even know if you could call it an obstacle course, but it was essentially just like stack or pieces of wood on the dirt. And the idea was you had to jump from piece of wood to piece of wood and then like run on these boards. And we'd set up this obstacle course such that you had to run through it under a certain amount of time. So I would time him, he'd run through it, blah, blah, blah. He would time me, right? And I'd run through it, blah, blah, blah. And for some reason, man, I could not beat his time. I could not at all. Like I couldn't even get close. And it was just so frustrating. I remember my family came and picked me up and we went to a movie afterwards. And I was like on the verge of tears as I left his house because I was like, why can't I do this? So I'll get back to that story in a second. But number 4 is that you are not Matt Mercer. You're not Brendan Lee Mulligan. You're not Mark Sherlock Holmes from High Rollers. You're not me, probably for a good thing, honestly, but you're you, okay? As a dungeon master, you have amazing strengths that you don't even know about because you don't spend time looking at them. You spend time looking at other people's. Back to my story with my friend. I found out years and years and years later after we'd graduated high school, we're still good friends to this day. He told me he lied. He didn't tell me that he didn't give me my accurate time. He would add some extra seconds because he wanted to see how fast I could actually go. And towards the end, I was beating him by quite a lot because I thought I was behind. So I pushed myself even further. Now, that's sort of a funny story. Also, you might think badly of him. I think that's a funny story. But the point is, my angst and frustration came from me comparing myself to him in an unfair way. And I didn't even know it was unfair. But most of the time when we compare ourselves to other people, it's unfair. So the best way to do it is to compare yourself to yourself. As a dungeon master, you need to look at each session as a comparison of the session before. And even that's not entirely accurate. It's best to do what we just did. Look at yourself now, and then look at yourself maybe a year, 2, 3 years ago, and compare. And you'll see that you've made so much improvement, but not just that, you've let certain strengths bubble up to the surface. And that's really where your power comes from as a dungeon master. And one of the fallacies, I don't even know if that's the right word, but one of the problems with looking at Matt Mercer, Brendan Lee Mulligan, all these really quite spectacular dungeon masters is we focus on their strengths. But see, they didn't do that. They focused on their strengths. They didn't focus on someone else's. So if you want to become like them, ironically, you should focus a little bit less on their strengths and focus more on your strengths and grow those. So remember, you're not Brendan Lee Mulligan, you're not Matt Mercer, and that is a good thing. For number 5, let me save you some very intense mental energy, okay? And let me tell you a story, as with all of these, to get that started. There was once a person who lived in a disadvantaged home life. Maybe their parents were dead, they were orphans, they were living with an aunt or uncle, and they lived a very ordinary life. But then, out of nowhere, they were ushered into kind of a new world. They met someone, a mentor perhaps, who told them that there's more to life and instructed them and showed them that there's more to be seen, there's more to be heard, right? And then that person ends up going on a journey far away from their home They probably lose their mentor at some point, maybe gain some new mentors, gain new friends, and then they eventually fight a very dark and large force. And then they return home, bringing the spoils of their adventure. You've probably heard this story, or maybe portions of the story in some way, shape, or form. I've probably butchered it as well, but this is essentially the Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. It's the idea that there's sort of this meta story behind a lot of the stories we come up with. And I tell you this to help you remember that, number 5, you don't have to be completely original. In fact, most people believe that the creation of new ideas is not actually pure creation, but it's instead synthesis of two apparently disparate concepts, ideas, or entities, and the connection thereof. You don't have to be completely original. All you need to do is make things that you like. And in time, as you build your skill, like we've talked about, the originality will come, and you won't need to worry about it. Just focus on having fun and getting better, and originality will come. Tip number 6, and I really, 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 really like this one, but I don't really relish the thought of telling you about it because it's kind of embarrassing. Let me show you what I mean. Back in junior high, a lot of these stories are when I was younger. I think I've grown a lot since then, or maybe I just have a worse memory, so I don't remember other stories. But in junior high, I was a very shy kid, still am. Like I said, I'm not a kid anymore, though. But in 9th grade, I liked this girl. And wouldn't you know it, I ended up asking her to be my girlfriend. We'd never hung out or done anything or whatever. But she said yes. I mean, we sat next to each other in class, and, we were good friends. But so she was now my girlfriend, right? And we held hands in between classes at school and stuff like that. And I don't think my brain was mature enough really to comprehend what a girlfriend or a relationship was at the time. I'm hopeful that I've grown since then. You'll have to ask my wife. But one day, it was a Friday, we went to my friend's football game, and me and this girl were sitting in the bleachers together. This was actually like our first time hanging out after school. Again, you're probably laughing at this stupid story, but anyways, it doesn't matter. I will bear myself to you in the name of podcasting and helping you be a better dungeon master, even though my face is already turning red. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can probably see. While we're holding hands and stuff, she kept on saying things like, "Wow, I'm cold," and stuff like that. Like, I gave her my jacket. I was like, "Yeah, good job, Justin. You gave her your jacket. Good for you." But I didn't learn until later that she was wanting me to put my arm around her. She kept on leaning up against me. I didn't realize. And apparently, I didn't realize this at all, but a friend came up and was talking to us. And then after the game, they talked to me and said, "You were leaning away from her." I didn't realize this at all. I think I just naturally have kind of a bubble of space, and I was leaning away from her. Okay. Now I tell you that story not to, with me telling you that story, you've learned some things about me. You've learned some things that I probably don't actually want you to know. And interestingly enough, I didn't actually tell you those things. So you've learned that I'm kind of naive a little bit, or at least I was. Maybe I am still. You've learned that when it came to girls in junior high, I didn't know anything. Probably didn't know anything later either. But you've learned these things about me, not because I've come out and said this is how I am, but through me showing you that I am that way. Tip number 6 is show, don't tell. This is the hallmark of good writing, good role-playing, and good dungeon mastering, all right? And actually, I'll give you another example. I'm reading the Call of the Netherdeep source book from Critical Role, which is amazing, by the way. It's really good. And actually, one other side note, this is why you should read other source books and materials, because you'll learn better ways to structure your own writing. Anyways, so one thing I've noticed in this, as you're going into a new city, it's the city of Ank'Harel, which is in Marquette, which is in Exandria, which is in the Critical Role. You get the idea. But there's this table, and I've never seen this in any other source book, but this table is basically just a table of scenes that the party will see or maybe encounter as they're walking around in the city. And these scenes show the culture and the feel of the city without you having to tell your players this is how it is. And this is something I'm going to try and incorporate with most of what I do from now on. When my players go to new areas or the characters go to new places, I'm going to try and incorporate showing, not telling. This leads to immersion because in real life, when you go to the store, you don't see that you don't hear, someone doesn't tell you that the store is this. Instead, you experience it, you see it, you feel it. That is what is behind Show Don't Tell. I gotta say, I'm already at the 30 minutes, which is kind of crazy. I'm just over halfway. So I'm actually going to cut up today's episode into 2 parts. All right. I'm going to cut up this episode into 2 parts. This is the end of part 1. I just want to end by telling you to come back tomorrow to hear the second part of today's episode. And also, thank you for listening to this far. If you're on Instagram or if you're in our Discord or if you have our email or whatever, reach out to me. Tell me what you thought of today's episode. I'm always looking for more feedback. So if you have anything you'd like to say, I'd love to hear it. But we'll be back next time with another handcrafted episode from Session Zero Studios on how to be a better DM just for you. But until then, let's go ahead, roll initiative.